very warm welcome to all of you. And we are really happy that so many people turned up. And I'm particularly happy that we have so many participants from India. And that's really a good omen. I hope that, although it has been a while ago, but I hope you all had a good start of the new year of 2025. So we have very painful topic today, actually, one of the most painful topic around these days. A lot has been this being said and discussed on this conflict. Uh, and we had a lot of change also in the situation ever since we made this announcement, because we saw this ceasefire agreement taking place. uh, so this agreement, I'm sure we will address it during our discussion, but it hasn't really changed anything, uh, or something very little, probably giving them a bit of breathing space. But the fundamental issues haven't been addressed as they haven't been addressed in past so many decades. So before we go on to the topic, I would just like to give, as Amir Rana said, a brief introduction to uh, OPP. Uh, so here we go. The purpose of our organization is to provide a platform for the people who endeavor to enhance cooperation among communities to promote progressive values. Our vision is very simple, very compact: unity in diversity. And our mission is to strive to eliminate exploitation of all kinds and discrimination through meaningful dialogues. And if you look at our inclinations, our political inclination is that we believe in democracy, human rights, minority rights, gender equality, and we don't have affiliation with any political party whatsoever. On the religious side, we strongly believe in the separation of the state and religion, i.e., secularism. And socially, we believe in inclusion, in tolerance, acceptance, and harmony. And for more details, questions, you can always visit our website, write to us, call us, and we will be more than happy to answer any questions. And we will be more than happy if you can provide whatever support you can to OPP. Coming back to the topic today, I have just copy pasted a text from our announcement. And why I did that, because it also serves an introduction to what we are going to discuss in the coming hour or 2 hours. So I'll just read the first part of it. With its roots in colonialism, it is a story of the collusion between Zionism and imperialism, a story of destruction, dispossession, racism, apartheid, dehumanization, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, breaking international laws and violating human rights, condemned by the World United Nations and ICJ, etc. Now, it's very hard to associate all these nice adjectives with one country, but here we are, and rest, you have read it in our announcement. Moving onwards, there has been a report published by Amnesty International back in December. It is a very comprehensive report, and I would strongly recommend for everyone who is interested to read it. It's available on the internet. They have not only analyzed and researched the present situation, but they have given a very good and broad historical perspective as well. One point I have taken out is the dehumanization of Palestinians, on which Amnesty International says that anti-Palestinian incitement and advocacy of hatred has resulted in an environment where anti-Palestinian incitement and advocacy of hatred was allowed to spread unchecked. By 2023, the levels of hate speech and incitement had reached alarming heights, reflecting a deeply grained and escalating racism towards Palestinians within the Israeli society. In conclusion, they say that Amnesty International has found sufficient basis, and every word here really is important. They have sufficient basis to conclude that Israel committed prohibited acts under different articles of the Genocide Convention, namely killing, causing serious bodily or mental harm, and deliberately inflicting on Palestinians in Gaza conditions of life calculated to bring about their physical destruction in whole or in part. The organization has also found sufficient basis to conclude that these acts were committed with the specific intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza. And elsewhere, they also say that the Gaza has been destroyed to a degree that it is incapable of producing any food in many years to come. So just think of that. The UN Special Rapporteur on Right to Food, he concluded, or she concluded, that Israel has engaged in an intentional starvation campaign against the Palestinian people, which evidences genocide and extermination. I mean, these are very strong words by some very highly reputable organizations. Uh, they say that a picture speaks 1,000 words, and this picture speaks 10 million words. I don't need any explanation. You can simply visually see how dehumanization, dispossession has been in progress over the decades, and this is where we have ended up with now. Now, let's assume that all I have told or mentioned so far is a propaganda, as Israel very much likes to believe that these are all lies, this is whatever, anti-Israeli lobby, and so on and so forth. So let's assume that billions of people, including liberal and progressive Jews in Israel and all over the world, are biased. So let's see for a moment what Israeli leaders themselves have been saying about themselves and about their own policies and politics. Now, here are a few clippings. Benjamin Netanyahu, to start with. We must defend ourselves against the wild beasts. And the Minister of Justice, who is supposed to provide justice, says they should go, as should the physical homes in which they raise the snakes. Otherwise, more little snakes will be raised. Defense Minister said the Palestinian threat harbors cancer-like attributes that have to be severed. There are all kinds of solutions to cancer. Some say it's necessary to amputate organs, but at the moment I'm applying chemotherapy. The former deputy prime minister says, send Gaza back to the Middle Ages. Now, if this is not genocide, what else it is? Let's move on. Another defense minister said, those who are against us, there's nothing to be done. We need to pick up an axe and cut off his head. Another deputy prime minister says Palestinians are beasts. They are not human. And again, Mr. Prime Minister, he says, beat them up. Not once, but repeatedly. Beat them up so bad, it hurts so badly until it's unbearable. And this guy takes the cake. You probably want to read his book and watch his talk shows. He says there is justification for killing babies if it is clear that they will grow up to harm us. Now, I am lost for words, really. Now, this is what people said long before this recent conflict or war started. But what about the current war? Here, what they have been saying is burn Gaza now, nothing less. Now we have one common goal, erasing Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. And then the defense minister, while they went for attack, said, I have ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. And now this gentleman, Mr. Mike Hageby, uh, he has been appointed American ambassador to Israel. And about him, what Trump has said is very interesting. I mean, you can read that he loves Israel and people of Israel love him, and Mike will work tirelessly to bring about peace in the Middle East. Now, what kind of peace will he bring? Just in his own words, Mr. Mike Huckabee, he says, from the moving of the embassy, recognition of Golan Heights, and Jerusalem as the capital, no one has done more than President Trump. And I fully expect that this will continue. He goes on another occasion, basically, there is no such thing as I need to be careful about saying this because a lot of people will get upset, there is really no such thing as a Palestine. And then he says, there are certain words I refuse to use. There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There is no such thing as a settlement. They are communities, they are neighborhoods, they are cities. There is no such thing as occupation. And then our last but not least, our most of the European leaders, they weren't very far behind. They were literally falling over each other to visit Israel. And every statement they gave started with Israel has the right to defend itself, and we stand unconditionally and squarely behind. They never ever mentioned a word on the plight and rights of Palestinians, while the world has been protesting against the genocide. And our being Netherlands, Geert Wilders even visited illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank last December, right after arrest warrant was issued for Netanyahu. And you might want to read his speech on the internet, what he said while he was in the occupied territories. Uh, Vijay Prashad, those people who know it, in a very typical Vijay Prashad way, he said, this is a Western crime against civilization. And I think you probably can't summarize it better than this. So coming to our two speakers today. I'm calling them speakers, but they are actually much, much, much more than speakers to us. I mean, both of them, Maya and Ishtiaq, if I may call them by first names, they have been really, really source of inspiration for not only for us, but for many people around the world. They have been really fighting and working hard on so many fronts for humanity. So I will just give a brief introduction for both of them. Dr. Maya John, she is a labor historian teaching at the University of Delhi. Currently, she is an elected member of the university's academic council and general secretary of the Indian Association for Women's Studies. She is life member of Center for Women's Development of Studies. Some of Dr. Maya's recent research and publications relate to fields such as mass social movements, political strategies of left movements, the evolution of India's labor laws, the impacts of labor segmentation in the Indian workforce, education policy measures, histories of educational inequalities, and history of epidemics and epidemiology. She has also co-edited a book titled Who Cares? Care Extraction and the Struggles of Indian Health Workers, and has edited Debating Education in India, Issues and Concerns. Recently, on this very topic, she has written on Israel's genocide in Palestine and the need for subaltern internationalism. She is associated with different social movements for the last 2 decades. She has been working with the Domestic Workers Union in Delhi NCR and with unions of sanitation workers, nurses, and teachers. A very warm welcome, Dr. Maya. Thank you very much that you took time to join us today. Uh, Dr. Ishtiaq, uh, well, what can I say about him? He has been inspiring us and supporting us like hell for such a long time. And he's a Swedish political scientist and author of Pakistani descent. He obtained his PhD in political science from Stockholm University, where he is currently professor emeritus. During 15 to 19, he was visiting professor at the Government College Lahore. 13 to 15, visiting professor at the Lahore University of Management Sciences, the famous LUMS. He is an honorary senior fellow of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. He's now sitting in Thailand, actually, enjoying the warm weather. But he's also visiting research professor at the Institute of South Asia Studies, author of several books, but I have listed 3 which have created lots of waves. One is Punjab bloodied, partitioned, and cleansed, Pakistan, the garrison state, and the most recent one, Jinnah, his successes, failures, and role of history. Absolutely worth reading. So welcome, Dr. Ishtiaq. It's over to you. I have stopped sharing the screen. And so, Dr. Maya, if you would like to take the floor and do your introduction, 15 to 20 minutes, we are flexible. Following which Dr. Ishtiaq will do the same, and then we will, as Amir Rana said, open the floor to questions and answers. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. Maya. Please.
I just hope my voice is loud and clear enough.
Yes, yes.
Great. Thank you. So I would like to, of course, begin with a warm thanks to Overseas Progressive Pakistanis, OPP, for this opportunity to share the platform with Professor Iftikhar Ahmed. And of course, for organizing this very, very important discussion on the actual factors and forces that are fueling the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As rightly reflected in the title of today's discussion, the brutal genocide of Palestinians and the growing might of Israel in the Middle East is nothing but part of an imperialist venture led most decisively by the strategic interests of the US in the region. Now, of course, some seek to rationalize the ensuing Israeli-Palestinian conflict by, drawing on the belief that Israelis are the quote unquote original inhabitants of this region and have suffered 2 millennia of exodus, and that they have the right to return and settle in what is considered as the quote unquote promised land as per biblical belief. Others consider that Israel is a settler's colony and that Palestinians have all the rights to recover their country. Not so long back, we know the compromises of the Oslo Accords were thought to be a way forward in settling the crisis by creating two states within which Israelis and Palestinians would achieve the long-lost peace in the region. Yet we know very well that peace has failed to materialize. In the context of rising Islamophobia, conservative political opinion asserts time and time again that the lack of this peace in the region is due to a longer history of religious strife and supposed Muslim bigotry. Needless to say, history is more complex. So just allow me a few minutes to trace how this region emerged as a strategic one, paving the way for a long history of endemic conflict over its resources. Let's say the longue durée perspective reveals a very tumultuous history of the region as a crossroad of religion, culture, commerce, and politics. It is located at a strategic location between Egypt, Syria, and Arabia, and is situated in an area between three continents, with an immensely long history of human settlement, commerce, as well as empire formation. The region was also an important center for the development of and very complex interface between diverse religious faiths and worldviews. The development of Judaism, Roman paganism, Christianity, and Islam are all part, therefore, of the region's historical tapestry. Essentially, the region saw the emergence of the earliest norms and narratives of organizing societies. Now, given the region's prosperity and its strategic location vis-a-vis important networks of trade and commerce, contestation over access to these were endemic. Many of these conflicts that appear as religious strife in history were actually in real terms embroiled in the rise and fall of different empires and were actually embedded in competing political formations over the control of this region's strategic location within long distance trade. So contrary to the popular perception of the persecution of Jews at the hands of Muslims, various religious communities in the region actually clashed with each other prior to even the rise of Islam. And conflicts also arose due to schisms within the Jewish population. Now, further, I'd say the instances of conflicts between Jews and other communities, were irreducible. Historically speaking, they cannot be reduced to mere religious strife, since these conflicts were always, enmeshed intricately with calculations of empire formation and the desire to control the region's strategic access to trade routes and commercial networks. Similar calculations, I would say, very similar calculations have been imbricated in the ongoing conflict, which has reduced Gaza to a casualty of a brute war waged by the Israeli Zionist state, backed, of course, by imperialist forces. It is a well-known fact that the prelude to the Israel-Palestine conflict lies in the promotion of Zionism by the colonial powers during First World War and the resulting partition in May 1945 of what was then the British-ruled mandatory Palestine. The early Zionist movement had a grand vision of colonizing the territory for a Jewish separatist state that corresponded with the biblical ancestral, quote unquote, homeland of Israel for Jews. Now, when the British took over Palestine in World War I, Zionists, decided to throw in their lot with the British colonial power. Importantly, the Zionist lobby was well received by British leaders, for whom the First World War reinforced the strategic importance of the Middle East. The region, for example, surrounded the sea routes to Britain's most prized imperial colonies, namely the Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, and East Africa. It bordered new oil fields in Persia and Egypt, where, of course, nationalist movements contested British rule. Further, France, another imperialist competitor, had secured a foothold in the Middle East through Syria. So drawing on what is known as the Balfour Declaration 1917, Britain actually began promoting the Zionist movement and legitimizing the colonization of Palestine. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased over the next few decades, except for a brief period during the Second World War. In the wake of the armed Jewish resistance movement and the growing discontent of the Arab population, Britain hastily announced in February 1947 its intent to terminate the mandate for Palestine. It referred the matter of the future Palestine to the UN, the United Nations. By November 1947, the United Nations authorized partitioning the land into two states. And in mid-May 1948, the formal partition unfolded between the sovereign Jewish and Arab states. This was closely followed on its heels by the first Israeli-Arab conflict, 1948-49, resulting in the displacement of approximately 7 lakh Palestinians, also known as Nakba, the Great Catastrophe. Now, going back to the partition of Palestine in 1948, it is very important to recognize that the strategy of partition was a very potent tool of British imperialists, which was clearly compatible with the doctrine of divide and rule, or divida et impera. The strategy of partition was a very prominent, tried and tested strategy of the ruling elites of the British imperialist era. It was used in the case of Ireland in 1920s and also in the case of India in 1947. Importantly, with the loss of India, the oriental endpoint of the Second British Empire was immediately re-established on the Persian Gulf, with the Palestinian region, rising in importance. This was more so given the imperial control over neighboring Egypt, proving increasingly difficult, especially as Egyptian nationalism grew and eventually precipitated the toppling of the monarchy, so as to establish the Egyptian Republic in 1952. Now, given this, Palestine was, the obvious alternative for the strategic control of the Suez Canal that connects European trade, as we know, with Asia. Yet I'd say even before these, 20th century, developments, the Palestinian region had a significance for the Second British Empire. As early as 1847, the British politician Benjamin Disraeli, in his very banal novel, A Tancred, recognized that for the vast and fast expanding Second British Empire, the center was Palestine. Of course, the discovery later in the 20th century of oil deposits in the Middle East further propelled Palestine's importance for the imperial powers. Henceforth, apart from a question of access to trade routes and the Suez Canal, the region's strategic importance also grew in terms of its rich petroleum deposits. In the wake of Britain's exhaustion and declining, imperialist might in the course of the Second World War, the United States emerged as the new superpower. Already by the early 20th century, American military interventions were closely tied to the interests of big businesses and banking firms. There are so many examples that one can, think of. But I can't resist quoting one example in particular that shows that many Americans themselves were very conscious of and aware of the imperialist American plunder. So I'm, going back to quoting a U.S. Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, who quoted in November 1935 in a special issue of the socialist magazine Common Sense. He said the following: I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, Wall Street, and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. Quote closed. Expectedly, America keenly eyed the Middle East's new discovered and vast oil deposits. US State Department officials in the 1940s itself, for example, in 1945, when you look at documents, were known to have identified the Gulf region as, and I'm quoting, probably the richest economic prize in the field of foreign investment, quote closed. President Eisenhower, later in his address to the US Congress on 5th January 1957, described it as, and I quote, the most strategically important area of the world, quote closed. A growing control on these oil deposits proved even more crucial in the context of America's quest for global dominance. As we enter the 1960s, larger global politics brought the US government closer and closer to Israel and wedded American imperialist interests in the Middle East to Israeli expansion and promotion of Zionism. Popular movements against regimes that favored the US imperialist interests in the region, the extension of support by the Soviet Union for these people's movements, and the imperialist interest in the region's oil and gas reserves are key factors leading to a combination of ruling elites and Zionism. With the goal of preventing the Soviet Union from aiding the region's democratic movements against the nexus of Arab elites and the imperialist forces, the top priority for America during the peak of the Arab-Israeli conflict was the extension of support for the state of Israel. The United States was not easily able to assert the dominance it desired in the Middle East. Israel was hence brought in to perform this function of establishing regional stability for the US, triggering since 1967. The US then quickly replaced Britain and France as Israel's new, more committed imperial sponsor, extending vast quantities of economic assistance, military equipment, and support for virtually every Israeli foreign policy objective. In pursuit of a stable flow of oil from the Persian Gulf, among other goals, America since the 1970s, that is the various agreements with petrol exporting Arab states, has successfully enforced its hegemony over the oil trade and imposed the imperialist petrodollar economy based on the consistent international demand for the American dollar, irrespective of the economic health of the US. Against the backdrop of this, this context, we're also seeing significant resistance to American dominance and imperialism, as well as the hesitation of some of America's key allies to take on enhanced burdens, the way Trump's administration has pushed the huge financial costs for America itself of waging a direct war, and the risks of revolts within the US military. All of these together, help us understand why and how American and Israeli interests have all the more converged in important ways. Regional stability means a Middle East amenable to the US. And for facilitating this, Israel has proven a useful counterweight to the rise and expansion of possible economic and political rivals who challenge America's dominance. America has consequently served as a very critical sponsor for Israel financially and politically, while Israel has played an invaluable role in helping the US dominate the Middle East. So just to quote some recent data, Washington channelizes approximately $3.8 billion in annually every year in aid, and an additional $8 billion in loan guarantees to Israel. The aid includes, American foreign military aid and funding for joint missile defense, which is promised to Israel as part of an ongoing 10-year, $38 billion memorandum of understanding on military aid covering the financial years 2019 to 2028. In return, of course, for such aid, the US gains access to an indigenous intelligence service, troops trained and familiar with the territory and ideologically committed, and all the weapons they would ever need there in the Middle East. Aggressively defending its strategic interests in the region, US imperialism continues to strengthen the Zionist Israeli state and shamefully fuels a genocide in Palestine. All this in order to protect the supremacy of the oil-driven trade in the dollar-driven trade in oil. Presently, almost all oil sales worldwide are transacted in the American dollar, making it de facto acquire the status of an international currency. The high rate of the US dollar allows for the US to achieve economic supremacy, since countries across the world need to keep building up their US dollar reserves to trade in oil. This apart, most of the world's imports, as we know it, are also invoiced in dollars, and these dollar prices are not very sensitive to the exchange rate, unlike producer currency prices. Consequently, to acquire a basket of goods from across the world, a particular country needs to build reserves of US dollar. Eventually, this means that the stronger the US dollar, the commodities imported into the US are relatively cheaper, while those exported from the US are more expensive for the purchasing countries, particularly poorer economies. Now, this trade in the US dollar is injurious to poorer economies of the world and by extension to the laboring masses of these countries. After all, to acquire the US dollar, a poorer economy has to devalue its currency with respect to the US dollar so as to compete in the market by selling commodities at a cheaper rate than their value. Hence, the labor embodied in the goods, in the commodities, is sold cheaply to acquire the US dollar, which amounts to greater overexploitation of domestic labor of poorer economies. In addition to such skewed world trade, US dominance in the world economy is further evident in her very disproportionate access to the world's resources, in spite of her very small population. Constituting anywhere between 4 to 5% of the overall world population, America consumes up to literally 1/3 of the world's paper, 1/4 of the world's crude oil, 23% of the world's coal, and so on. I would like to conclude my observations by identifying what is the self-interest of people, common people, contra this imperialism and contra Islamophobia. The prevailing crisis, as we know it, has repeatedly been projected in the dominant discourse as a conflict merely of religious communities, in which Israeli Jews are made out as hapless victims of Muslim Arab fundamentalists. To appease Muslim minorities in different parts of the world. Of this unabashed legitimation of the displacement of Palestinians has bred genocidal language and dehumanizing references. Wahid already read out some very, very disturbing examples of this. I would just like to, add on and give an example of how, post 7th October 2023, the genocidal language and action is taken and the action taken, have fallen into such perfect sync with each other. And it's most evident in, the Defense Minister Gallant's claim on 9th October. And he said, and I quote him, "We are fighting human animals and we act accordingly. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed," quote closed. Likewise, conservative politicians in countries allied to the Israeli Zionist state have expressed the same kind of sentiments. For example, the US presidential hopeful from the Republican Party, Nikki Haley, told Fox News, I think on the 10th of October, that the Hamas attack was not just on Israel, but, quote, "an attack on America." And she went on to assert Netanyahu finished them, finished them, finished them. Now, in the dominant discourse perpetuated by the mainstream media and governments in power, the covert Islamophobia is really hard to miss. Typically, the Islamophobic perspective dangerously conflates Arab Muslims with Islamic fundamentalists, wrongly subsumed within the quote-unquote Islamic religious identity by the powers that be. Arab Muslims are easily projected as being programmed into comprehending their selfhood solely through the religious lens, and that the issues consuming them are essentially those of religion. This Islamophobic typical view projects Arab Muslims as people perpetually prone to bigotry and persecution of other religious communities. Now, within this view, there is a constant downplaying of the rising death toll of children, Palestinian children in this war, by pointing to actions of Hamas, while shamelessly claiming that Palestinian Arab children are quote-unquote snakelets, that is future quote-unquote terrorists. What is effaced or removed in the Islamophobic demonization of Palestinian Arabs and the conflation of their struggles for self-determination with terrorism is the fact that for the past 75 years, the Palestinian people have used not one, but various means to fight for justice. They have been criticized when they have used armed struggle and also when they have resorted to non-violent means of struggle. It is then not the form of the Palestinian struggle which is the issue. The real issue is that Palestinians dare to struggle. Now, we are all children of colonialism, and the common interest of erstwhile colonized people has to be invoked to draw the common people away from the influence of Islamophobic discourses and their national governments that are cozying up to the American-Israeli imperialist nexus. Let us not reduce the ongoing conflict to merely a Muslim question. This is not about extending support to an unconnected other, but to a fellow brethren trapped in imperialist capitalist exploitation and oppression. Indeed, when we make it a merely Muslim question, we are actually breeding isolation and hence creating the scope for stigma. Indeed, given the realities of the imperialist world order, the laboring subaltern masses of the quote-unquote global south exercise an objective, immediate, as well as long-term interest in opposing wars and occupation of places like Gaza, since these wars strengthen the hold of imperialist America on the world economy, as well as perpetuate greater exploitation of labor at the hands of domestic capital. Likewise, opposing ongoing imperialist wars serves the long-term interests of working class and small producers in the quote-unquote global north as well. Within the ensuing imperialist world order, despite a certain degree of mounting contestation of US hegemony on worldwide accumulation, The US continues to rule the roost, especially through its control over the oil economy and financial institutions like the World Bank, IMF, etc. But of course, the benefits from the global dominance of the US dollar are availed largely by Wall Street and the country's defense establishment. In the long run, American dominance has severely cost the bulk of American workers, small farmers, producers, and small businesses. It is this section of people who can potentially be weaned away from the control of American capital, even in the global north. It is precisely this objective interest of the common people that highlights the scope for a subaltern internationalism on compounding international crises, one that is autonomous of the approach of their governments and of political and economic elites. For erstwhile colonized regions of the world that have been plundered and brutalized by former colonial powers, solidarity for the Palestinian people seems natural. And yet the elites who have emerged from within the ranks of erstwhile colonized societies have dangerously converged, unfortunately converged with the empire of capital, which continues to expropriate the natural resources and exploit the people. In this way, I would say more than Palestinians needing the solidarity of the international community, the freedom of Palestinian people is the precondition for unshackling the common people across the world from the chain of the empire of capital. I would just like to end with saying that, the recent ceasefire that has been declared, it really comes at the last leg of, a massive genocide, where the destruction is irreparable. And we know that the war continues in other forms and that the occupation continues. We want peace, but it can't be a peace without justice. That would just be a graveyard. Ceasefire remains a facade. We have to rise to the occasion. We must rise to the occasion and lay the foundation for lasting peace. Without a doubt, justice alone can be the base for that lasting peace, justice for Palestinians and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Maya, for your passionate comments and well-prepared talk. Let me request Dr. Ishtiaq to please take the mic, sir.
Yeah, I think the mic is on.
Yes,
Do you hear?
yes, sir. Please.
Thank you very much for organizing this seminar, this discussion. And I think Dr. Maya has laid down the basic structure in which the Palestinian-Israeli conflict has emerged, emphasizing, as I understand, largely the political economic basis of it. I totally endorse her observations, but would like to maybe look at how Zionist nationalism represents a trend within Western societies. And therefore, there is a sort of affinity between what for them is Israel and the way they look upon Asian people. You see, it's extremely ironical that it's in European societies until about the Second World War, the Jews were always considered aliens. This idea of a Judeo-Christian civilization is a much later invention. Largely, the Jews were considered alien in Europe, and time and again, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, even Western Europe, there were pogroms of Jews. So we have to understand why after the First World War or during the First World War, a basic change in orientation started taking place. And I would say that the emerging left movement at that time was an emphasis that workers of the world unite rather than nations or ethnic groups demanding their own separate entities. instead of joining with co-workers in changing society for the better. And I have mentioned in my book on Jinnah that among Jewish workers, there was a certain feeling that they need to organize themselves separately from others. But Lenin then wrote that it was in their best interest to join with workers of other nations in the defense of the common interest of the working class. And it's interesting to note that when the Zionist question in the 1930s emerged, uh, more uh, strongly when Hitler started persecuting the Jews, the Bund, the movement of the Jews working class, they decided not to support the Zionist movement. Actually, uh, the most Orthodox Jews also opposed this demand for a separate Zionist state for the Jews, because this idea that the Jewish prayer, "Oh Lord, next year in Jerusalem," according to them was only a spiritual call. And they had to wait till the end of time before the situation was ripe. You know, there is an eschatology of Judaism and Christianity, uh, where and of Islam equally, where a Messiah is to come. And we know how this sort of thinking has impacted on politics. And while the Jewish workers did not support the Zionist movement, and the Orthodox Jews also opposed it, the anti-Jewish lobby in Europe, they were the ones who started promoting the Zionist movement. Lord Balfour was a rabid anti-Semitic. This is so well known. So while the Zionist movement of Theodor Herzl wanted a homeland for the Jews, the anti-Jewish people in Western Europe were equally in favor of driving the Jews out of Europe. And this has to be kept in mind, because the way history is distorted now in the West, we have to do something to correct it. Because if you, most of the people who are taking part in this webinar, not seminar, webinar, I know have a leftist orientation. So they would know that when Hitler started his Mein Kampf and his Zionist, his Nazi ideology, his whole argument was that world, the world is controlled by Jews through two threats. One is communism, which he thought was a Jewish conspiracy, and equally by financial capitalism, which he also alleged was a Jewish conspiracy. And I have argued that it's most intriguing that in March 1941, Marshal Stalin sent his foreign minister to France and Britain, saying that we should form an alliance against Nazi Germany, and I'll provide 100 million soldiers against the Nazis. The French and the British overruled such an offer, and it's only then that Stalin sent his foreign minister to Germany. So the Ribbentrop-Molotov alliance came into being. This is very often not mentioned in Western discussions on the Second World War and in the demonization of the communist movement, especially of Stalin. The point I'm trying to make is that at that time, the reason why this alliance was not made between Soviet Union and France and Britain was that they were all hoping that Hitler will attack Soviet Russia first, because the whole Zionist ideology was based on a rabid, morbid hatred of communism. But Hitler, in his own sort of reasoning, attacked the Western societies. So the whole course of the world of the war turned in a different direction. What I'm trying to point out is that the West of today, which gives a total freedom to Israel to act as it does, mercilessly against the Palestinians, were at one point hoping that Hitler will attack the Soviet Union, destroy communism, and it doesn't matter what he does to the Jews. But because of the Holocaust, we have to keep that in mind. I think this should have been mentioned. The horrors meted out to the Jewish people did shock Western conscience, if you want to call it, but in a very opportunistic manner. While their sympathy for the Jews increased enormously, equally, they directed their wrath against the Asian people, I would say the Muslim people, because the whole oil in the Middle East, was in what were Muslim societies largely. It's interesting to note that Israel itself didn't have oil potential. And one can argue that if it was purely because of oil that Western societies behaved the way they did, they could have chosen to actually find anchor in Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis at that time were extremely conservative and anti-communist as much as the Western world was. So I think it's not always the political economy, it's also those irrational trends in societies which we have to keep in mind. As I tried to explain, anti-Jewish feelings and anti-Semitism, as it is called, has a much, much stronger historical presence in the Western civilization in comparison to the Islamic civilization. And I can give you an example, and people will be very surprised I doing it today, but I think this needs to be done in order to put things in a proper perspective. The Quran has a verse saying that the people of the book, Jews, Christians, and Sabians, have a right to live among Muslims. They can retain their faith and their businesses as long as they pay the jizya tax. As compared to this, in the Christian understanding of the role of the Jewish priests who conspired against Jesus, the Son of God, and he was crucified and so on, for them, the Jews were those who have killed God. And that is why down the Western discussion of history and of people and of evil races and evil people, it's the poor Jews who were very much at the receiving end. Until the Second World War transforms their sympathies for the Jews, and maybe in a sense rightly so, and therefore Israel began to be seen as a state very much needed to protect the Jews from further persecution. I thought this was important to put in focus. because if we only go after the political economy aspect of it, and which is largely one that I endorse, we miss the irrational religious undercurrents, which also play a role in the way political forces align themselves down the historical um periods. So now the question is, what has happened in Palestine uh, after? Uh, I would also like to remind the audience that when this UN scheme was introduced for two states with Jerusalem as the shared capital of both Israel and Palestine, its Lord Count Bernadotte, a cousin of the Swedish king, who was assassinated uh, for proposing this. Within the Zionist movement, there no doubt there was a left wing and a fascist right wing. So there were two types of movements within the Zionist labor movement, and so uh, the Zionist fascists, if I were to call, they wanted to drive out all the Palestinians as soon as they could, and make Israel entirely a state for the Jews, because the Zionist slogan was uh, a people without a state for a people, a state, a people without a state, and a state for the people. Like the Jews had been denied a state down the centuries, now it was time for them to come to a place that there were no people, and it was only for the Jews. The truth was, of course, that there were all these Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, who had been living down there uh, throughout the Crusades, and when the Ottoman Empire became the ruling authority in that region. May I also point out that in 1492, when the Jews were thrown out of Spain, and then Muslims were also thrown out, the Jews mostly headed towards the Ottoman Empire for protection. And actually, ironically, tragically, in 19, what year was this now? In 1992, which was 500 years of the expulsion from Spain, in Israel, there was a celebration thanking the Ottoman Empire for giving them protection. But all this has to be brought out in the public so that we get a holistic picture of what has happened down the ages. What I'm trying to argue is that the religious factor has played a role in primarily first identifying Jews as an evil race, condemned, attacked over time, and now this swing in the other direction at the expense of the Palestinian people. And once again, I think the religious factor is very important when it comes to the politics of the United States. It's not just the Jewish lobby, which we know is all powerful and dictates its terms, ensures that those politicians who are a bit critical are not elected. Now this is coming out in so many programs that this is no longer something which is a matter of doubt. It's a fact. But the electoral basis of American politics is is not just the Jewish lobby, which has the money, but also 40 million evangelical Christians who believe that in the second coming of Christ, before that, all Jews have to assemble in Palestine, and then Jesus will come. And I think that suits the Zionists very well, because when Jesus comes, and when what will be the situation at that time depends on the on Jesus returning and being accepted and so on. But until then, it's great. You get 40 million evangelical Christians ensuring that no president is elected who goes against the interest of Israel. So it's not just the oil which is important to understand why America behaves in such an arbitrary, in such a blatantly, brazenly unjust manner towards the Palestinian people. It has something to do with the role of religion, which, you know, continues to dictate American politics and also decides the fate of elections. I think I would not like to prolong this, since Dr. Maya John had given the overall framework, the political economic framework, the interests which were involved. I had to I had to look for another way of looking at this issue. I had not thought of doing it initially, but then I thought I have to improvise and come up with additional angles to understanding why the Western world is so opportunistic, so callous, so completely callous when an ongoing uh, genocide is transpiring, uh, and they are not moved. I've seen people in the European Union Assembly getting up and uh, shouting their criticism, and this lady, who's the head, Baron, what is some German aristocracy, she just laughs. She couldn't give a damn. So this sort of attitude, these are the people who first killed Jews, and now they have no objection to Palestinian blood uh, being spilled in the Middle East by the same people who they demonized down the centuries. I think I'll stop here.
Ms. Ghazala Anwar has raised her hand. Could you please unmute yourself and yes.
Yes, thank you very much to the organizers who organized this. This is such an important discussion. And I also wanted to thank Dr. Maya John, because um, uh, hearing this about this, an analysis that moves out of the frame of a religious conflict, is extremely important. And we see also that around the world now, people have responded to the Palestinian people's suffering. And in fact, the Muslim states have been the least vocal in this. So so here religion has been used as a false consciousness. I'm a deeply religious person, but I think that even the Christian Zionists, they have aligned themselves with the imperial goals because they gain from it materially. So that's now my question is, where do we see this? How do we see this unfolding, or how does Dr. Maya see this unfolding? From this point onwards, because anyone who studies the past has a better understanding of the future.
Thank you, Ghazala. Thank you. Dr. Maya, would you like to respond? Or should I take another question? Huh?
We can go with one by one. Some of the questions can be a quick response.
Yeah, please.
And we can evolve the strategy as the meeting unfolds. Thank you, Ghazala, for your comment and question. I would say that how do I see, it working, moving forward, or this moment that we are in? How do we see that precisely subaltern, internationalism express itself? Given the kind of compromised role of governments, etc. I would say just look at what, again, in erstwhile colonized people, put pressure on their government, South Africa, and, the way they approach the International Court of Justice. Even what we're doing here today, friends, from OPP, you may be in different parts of Europe, but because we're precisely having this kind of, conversation and discussion, it is precisely one very definitive small step, albeit small step, to definitive one towards forging that kind of required solidarity across borders. And I think that's precisely my response, that more of this needs to happen. And more of this needs to happen, in an organized way. That's actually how, we can compete with the given conditions. Because, given the way our governments are functioning, we're seeing them vacillate, we're seeing them, collaborate with the different power blocks, be it United States, the European Union, etc. So, it's not so much, we can't let the question be reduced to, what governments are doing and what they should do. It should be about, what common people need to do. Because ultimately, how much can we compel our governments to do things differently when they're allying increasingly with the trajectory of the interests, of imperialist forces? So I would say people cannot depend on their governments, the UN for peace. We need to become the power, the basis for lasting peace. So that's why I said what we're doing here today is very much a vital embodiment of what I see as subaltern internationalism, people connecting to people. And they're very, very important precursors to this. The way people came out, common people came out across borders on the issue of Vietnam. So that's the kind of momentum we need to move towards and constructively build, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Dr. Maya. Ray Sarim and then Lilith, one by one, please ask your question or you want to comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It was both the speeches from Dr. Maya John and Dr. Ishtaq Ahmed, very important points. Maya John has described in detail the role of US imperialism in connection in regard of the conflicts between Israel and Palestine. She has also described in detail the Zionist history before and after the World War II, as well as the background of the alliance between the ruling elites of Israel with Zionist, and the role of US imperialism on the hand of their domination as dollar as a world currency. On the other side, Dr. Ishtaq Ahmed had kindly informed about information what normally the Western press did not follow, especially the offer of Soviet Union before the World War II to form a front together with France, Britain, and Soviet Union.
Sir, please be short and ask your question. Huh? So
okay, I'll make it short now. My question is, now today they have managed a ceasefire. My question is that how would go it further? What's now? What would be the implication of this ceasefire, and what would be when we say looking to the future, the consequences of this ceasefire?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rais. Lilith, can you please ask your question? Yeah, unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I have one question, but it will be added to another question. So it will be linked with one another. So we all know the facts on both sides. They have been presented, or arguments or narratives, all of that. What do the speakers see will be the solution, a long-term solution for this area? Because there has been so many attempts to resolve. We all know that, especially those who have read it all. It's available. And secondly, how can we make it sure that the October the 7th will never happen again? That civilians will not be abducted, slaughtered, and killed within their homes. You call it armed conflict or armed resolution. I call it murdered people who were trying to just dance and enjoy their day. And the remaining captives, how do you think they could be brought back, or what could be done to bring them back? And how can we resolve this conflict, which I don't see as a conflict, that's another issue. But how can we resolve this conflict long term so that we have peace in the region and we do not get problems in the future? How do the respected speakers see that? That's it.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
So both the questions, we can join it because they are almost the same. So Dr. Ishaq and Dr. Maya.
Well, as far as what would be a just peace in the Middle East or in Palestine, there is no doubt it has to be a two-state solution. For a while, there has been an argument that because of the settlements, so many Israelis are now living in the occupied West Bank, that maybe the best is to have one state where Jews and non-Jews can all live as equal citizens. But I think that's actually more difficult to achieve, because the whole idea that this is a state for Jews is so strongly rooted in the Israeli population, the majority at least. Of course, there is Gideon Levy and so many enlightened Israelis who oppose this, but most of them would rather that Israel remained a Jewish state. In that case, the only just solution is to give the Palestinians their state according to the 1967 resolutions, which call for Gaza and the West Bank to be connected and East Jerusalem to be part of the Palestinian state. You know, today is the 19th. Had we had this discussion a week later, when Trump was in power, we would be in a better, perhaps, situation to say how things will unfold in this region. But at the moment, if it is a question of justice, then justice is when both people get their own state. Whether Zionism was an imperialist conspiracy and all that, one can discuss. But the fact is, just to complicate issues, the first state to recognize Israel was the Soviet Union. And the reason they did was that Hitler and his Nazi armies not only killed Soviet citizens, but especially targeted Jews. So everybody knew that Jews had been brutally treated by Hitler. And so while the de jure recognition of Israel is by the Soviet Union first, de facto was by the USA. Why I say de facto? Because they waited until the first elections were held in Israel. So actually, the first state to recognize Israel is the Soviet Union. And I think we have to keep that all in mind in order to have a just solution. The Jews now, wherever they are, the Zionists, if they agree to live in peace with the Palestinians, I have no problem. The oppressed people of the world should have no problem. Why can't there be space for the Israelis also to live in peace in their own state? That's the way I would look at it.
Can I be heard? Yes. Thank you for the question, Lilith. See, I definitely have, my own understanding of where a solution lies to this compounding crisis. But I very strongly believe that, it's really the people of that region who need to, evolve and resolve their relation with the state system, whether it's going to be, a single state, or whether it's going to be, two states, single state with minority rights, or, a two states system. And I think that, one can't impose one's formula or what, we think is going to resolve this ultimately, because that, we can't derive the region's people, the people of the region, their agency. What I'd like to keep, asserting in the meeting here today, which is so crucial for all of us, I think, is what is going to be, our contribution. We're not from the region per se, but what are we going to do that's going to be conducive towards long-lasting peace based on justice? And that is, my claim here is that, we need to be able to create an international milieu. In which, we see, therefore, a conducive condition laid for people, both in the region and, across, different parts of the world to connect independently and autonomously of, the imperialist forces and factors at play. So I think our contribution really needs to be deliberated on how we're going to get to that, sustainable international milieu that will enable the process of, people being able to coexist, including in the region that we're talking.
Yeah, Safdar Zaidi, please unmute yourself and then. Safdar Zaidi, can you ask your question? Unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Now it's unmute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Maya, for your brief explanation about the history of Zionist state in Middle East. I also invited a German friend, is here. Laterly, he will ask us a question, but later. But now my question.
Your question, please.
Yeah. So my question is about my observation, what I was actually doing since last 15 months after the invasion of Israel into Gaza, or Hamas reaction to Israel, whatever you can say. The observation was about Indian intellectuals and the Pakistani intellectuals, the pro-Moody's of pro-Hindutva intellectuals and Pakistani liberal or atheist side intellectuals, that both are in a same carriage. So the both are supporting Israel. The both are against Palestinian rights. I have no clue how intellectual community can put their weight to Netanyahu and the Trump or the Moody philosophy. So this is kind of mystery to me, probably because Dr. Maya is from India and dealing, of course, this kind of intellectual or pseudo-intellectual behavior. Can you please explain to me what's happening among this intellectual community? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Can someone, Dr. Maya, would you like to respond? Can
I
you
think I
please
was on
unmute
mute.
yourself?
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. I
Yeah.
think I was mute. Thank you again, Saptar, for the question. See, the intellectual community, in your country or the intellectual community here in India, it's not a homogeneous block. We do see, of course, a right-wing inclined intelligentsia in India, for example, being very dismissive of the claims of Palestine, and also belittling, the genocide that's happening. And of course, it's catering to that kind of section of people that the regime here, the Modi regime here, has also changed the earlier Indian states stance when it came to Israel and Palestine issues. What I'd like to say is that there are, however, in the spectrum of different intelligentsia or intellectuals in my country, for example, many who are very critical of the way in which the Indian state has been cozying up to, the cause of Israel, and of course backed by US imperialism. One cannot vouch for the Indian state here and what it's doing. One cannot vouch for a spectrum of, I'd say, cronies of the regime. But there will always be a spectrum of activists, of intellectuals who are doing their own, mobilizing of public opinion in a way that precisely syncs with subaltern internationalism, trying to create an alternative paradigm of questions and concerns. And I'd even go to the extent of saying that precisely, it's within that kind of churning that the alternative voices are trying to nurture, that we even see a very interesting critique of the shallow humanitarianism that was showcased by many political elites of different countries, including my own country. We've actually witnessed in the last 15 months to a form of diplomacy which seeks to maintain bilateral ties with Israel and Palestine separately. And such a diplomacy is actually being called out by many important, voices across different countries, because such diplomacy is actually based on a very active espousal of Israel's monopoly over violence, in terms of the basis of on the basis of Israel's right to defend itself, and the corresponding simultaneous delegitimization of the use of force, any kind of force or any kind of assertion of sovereignty by Palestinian people. So against this very skewed, disbalanced logic of, that is informing bilateral diplomacy with Israel and Palestine, many countries, including my own, have been vacillating like this. The endeavor of different countries, therefore, to, extend some medical aid or food aid to Palestinians, it has really been read and exposed to be a very shallow, hollow, meaningless exercise. Because it doesn't matter to these governments, that Gaza has remained in the thick of war as a consequence of, Israel's escalated military onslaught and colonization. So therefore, I think, what South Africa did that was, was a much more meaningful and remarkable show of solidarity with Palestine than any other country, including my own, has shown. So I'd immediately like to, say that these are my observations to what you've asked.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Ishaq, do you think that Pakistani progressive intelligentsia is siding with Israel?
I think it's a fringe group that we all know. Safdar Zaidi knows, and I know, and I don't understand why suddenly they should be charmed by somebody as cruel, as inhuman as Netanyahu, except, and I don't want to say it, I think this is some sort of self-hating sort of people who are supporting Israel and its actions, and also Trump in a way which is very disappointing. I don't want to say anything more than this because they are a fringe group. On the other hand, you have all the extremist Muslims and even, I think, Muslims in general supporting the Palestinians. So we don't have to worry about this small group in Pakistan. They mean nothing.
Thank you. Masood Mirza, can you please unmute yourself and ask question?
Yeah, thank you very much. We are living in Western countries, and after 7th of October 2023, there was one-sided reporting. For example, I am living in Germany. I can talk about Germany, and we had a lot of discussion with German friends, and there is an impression about the myth that Israel is a democratic state, and sometimes I find it difficult because the war between Palestinians and the Jews did not start on the 7th of October 2023. It has a long history. We have not discussed the role of the terrorist organization before the Israeli state was established, like, for example, Haganah and different other organizations. That was my observation, one thing, because German press reports if one Israeli dies, I condemn also the attack of Hamas on the civilians, but every day there are attacks and eviction of Palestinians from their land, and then we discuss whether it is ethnic cleansing, whether it is genocide. So I would also be thankful to you if you discuss this point, throw some light. And one more question, which is very important, I would like to know whether there is any relationship between Zionism and racism, because I was very much surprised that South Africa was so active about bringing the case of Palestinians in the National Court of Justice. Then I discussed with some South African friends, and they pointed out that at the time of apartheid regime in South Africa, Israel was supporting the apartheid government. Yeah. And if we see some interviews with Nelson Mandela, from 1991, 92, he was in New York. I have read these and I have seen these interviews, and he was hugging and supporting Yasser Arafat. And the people asked him in New York in one of the interviews, why are you so much in favor of PLO? He said that in our time of difficulties, then there was apartheid regime, PLO was supporting. So my question is kindly, please, from Mrs. Mayajon, could you please explain us whether Zionist ideology and apartheid ideology, there are relationship between them or not? And in the case, if it is an apartheid state, can we call it also a democratic state, Israel? Is it justified to say, really? Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Maya, please unmute yourself. Dr. Maya, unmute yourself. Okay. I think, yeah. Dr. Maya, unmute yourself.
Yes. See, I mean, you have raised many comments, Masood, and different moments in, the history of certain organizations. What I would like to just, again, in response to what you're saying, emphasize is that, we cannot forget that, while the Hamas has its history, I mean, where it comes out of, and what its political lineage has been. I don't have time to go into that, but what I'd say is that while there is a tendency for us to somewhere feel overwhelmed in terms of trying to explain Hamas's 7th October 2023 action, the point is that how do we contextualize it in a historical and rational manner so that we can again situate our own politics, we can situate our own intervention as an international community. You see, the thing is, what happened on the 7th of October, the strategy used by the Hamas, it's seen in so many different ways, and it has to be contextualized ultimately in a longer history. On that day to a mere terrorist attack on civilians, because you have to remember that in this history of many years of forceful occupation, of war, of terror, and use of immense violence by the Israeli Zionist state. I mean, literally, we see that it is a jailbreak in many terms that unfolded on the 7th of October, a jailbreak of a reaction to Palestinian people bearing the brunt of 75 years of displacement, apartheid, surveillance, and endless atrocities. Let's not forget that the majority of inhabitants in the Gaza Strip have been descendants of refugees who were displaced from the region, which became Israel after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and nearly 2.1 million Palestinians. Out of them, 1.7 million are actually refugees. And they've been notoriously, as we know, cornered into this very densely populated enclave where their movement has been severely restricted. Food, water, electricity supply has been controlled by the Israeli government, making it literally the largest open jail in the world. And today it lies in rubbles because now there's literally no building to bomb and hardly anybody left to kill. So of course, I would say that when we reflect on what has happened on the 7th of October, we have to see that there's been this long violence unleashed on Palestinian people, albeit with a few moments of ceasefires. But the occupation has continued. The forms of war have got more innovatively cruel and violent, taking huge death toll. So, in that context, I would just like to, quickly end my response to your comment by saying that, hence, for the right-wing forces, it is Islamophobia and Muslim bashing, and continuously, projecting any kind of assertion of oppressed Palestinian people as terrorism. That is the typical internationalism and the international discourse, Islamophobia of the right wing. My question again and again to all of us here is, what is our alternative to that? How are we going to situate our politics in response to that Islamophobia which is the international, form of political discourse for the right wing. What is our international discourse vis-a-vis that? So therein, of course, we need to keep pointing out that longer history of violence and genocide, and what is actually continuing to allow it to be sustained like this, and hence, that connection to the hegemony that the American state and economy enjoys, and the imperialist forces at play.
Thank you. I want to invite Dr. Ishaq on this, because Dr.
Yeah.
Ishaq, it looks like in keeping the context, so some can defend this Hamas attack, and the other thing that is very important, the other thing that
I think
we see
Maya
that
has explained it very well. I'll just respond to the question whether Israel is a democracy. I think that needs to be treated.
Yeah, please.
I would say that Israel is an ethnocracy, not a democracy. And ethnocracy is a government of a race or of an ethnicity. So for the Jews, many of them, maybe all of them, it is a democracy. There are elections. One government comes into power, another goes, and there is the free press and so many things for them to claim that it's a democracy. But it has different levels of differentiations against non-Jews until it comprehensively oppresses people on the occupied territories and in the Gaza Strip. So it's an ethnocracy. That's the right word for it, not a democracy. I proposed it even at the Atlantic Council when I was there 2 years ago. And the State Department and all of them were very confused when I said this, but they had no way to respond to it. So we should call Israel an ethnocracy. It may be a democracy for Jews, but ask a non-Jew what it is, and especially those on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And that's where the answer will come from. It's a democracy for Jews, that's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I make a remark, Rana Sahab?
Yeah.
My question is why we don't call Israel straight as an apartheid state? Because the country, South Africa, that was...
The thing is...
Yes, please.
No, people who know what is happening do call Israel as an apartheid state. It is an apartheid state, absolutely.
Thank you.
But South Africa was an apartheid state, and so is Israel.
So, but the relationship between racism
yes,
and communism, that's
absolutely.
why.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an apartheid state, no doubt.
Yeah, thank
they
you.
Have these tall buildings, walls and all keeping people from crossing. Yes.
Yeah.
It's an apartheid state.
Yeah, I think Lilith wants to ask a question. Lilith, do you want to?
No, I have no question, but I would like to add a remark.
You have observation, I can see.
Yes, there are certain things which have been said by Dr. Maya John and also by Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, which for me are a bit too much. Anyways, I would summarize it, the remark that I have. I find it very strange that without going into the discussion, what is apartheid, we just label Israel as an apartheid state, whereas more than 25% of their population is Muslim and they have right to elections. They have right to vote. They have right to offices. And I know Israelis who are Muslims and they have all those rights and they enjoy them. Anyways, I would rather call Pakistan as an ethnocratic state where the head of the army and also the head of the state cannot be a non-Muslim, which we all know, by the way. So ethnocratic is more fitted to Pakistan. Then another remark on the thing that the attack, you call it terror attack, you call it whatever, resistance, whatever it was, the 7th of October, it wasn't just a mere terrorist attack. I think it was one of the biggest one of the biggest issues that we are unable to understand is that Hamas does not want an Israel. There cannot be a two-nation solution as long as Hamas says the entire Israel is a Palestine. Why I say that? Because the mandate that the British took over, and then they decided it should be decided by the UN if there will be a partition. They partitioned the Palestinian mandate into West Jordan land and Israel, and into the East or the Transjordan state, which is today's Jordan. So Palestine was already divided into these two states in 1948. And Palestinians got their state, but they never wanted to keep that. They wanted everything from the Jews, which I find very strange because Pakistan was also born a year prior to that. If Muslims of India can ask for another state, why can't Jews of the world ask for their ethnic homeland to be declared as their Jewish state? I beg to differ with that, with respect. But I find it that there is a lot of Jew hatred I still see in Germany, coming from Palestinians, coming from all around the Arab world. We have LGBTI people running away from Gaza, running away from West Jordan land, which are being killed and hanged and every day murdered by the Hamas and Hezbollahs and their alikes. We don't talk about those things, which I find very strange. In Tel Aviv, I can still go and get married as a gay man. Try that in Saudi Arabia. Try that in another country. But anyways, coming back to the topic, is it apartheid or is it imperialist? Imperialist, I would say we are, yes, there is an imperialism. Pakistan is also part of that. So is European Union.
Yeah.
But when it comes to apartheid, I don't see any apartheid over there.
Understood.
in the
Understood,
land of Islam.
Lilith. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Isiaq,
Thank you. Thank
please.
you.
Yeah. Dr. Isiaq.
First of all, I don't think Pakistan was in the discussion. So to extend it to Pakistan, I would agree that this description applies to Pakistan as well. But then both these states were created in the name of religion, and that's the problem. And therefore, both are, at least I describe Israel in a more benign manner as an ethnocracy. Pakistan is even not that. It oppresses its own people. There is no democracy in Pakistan. So I think you have misunderstood the conceptual clarity that I wanted to give. Israel is an ethnocracy. It is a democracy for Jews. And if there is a law of return here, which says that any Jew can come and settle in Israel whenever he wants or she wants. But a Palestinian driven out in 48, in 67, in 73 or later, there is no chance of returning. They make it so very difficult for them to come back. And apartheid, yes, they have created these areas where you have to cross the, these police posts and so on. That is what apartheid is all about. Keep people separate. You can't go to the settler colonies. If you do, they beat you up. What else is apartheid? You keep people apart from each other and by force. Regarding about Hamas and all, I think you need to do some studies because is Netanyahu and Ariel Sharon who actually started patronizing Hamas because the PLO had accepted that we want a two-state solution and we want to live in peace with Israel. Actually, in 2001, Saudi Arabia declared that if Israel accepts the two-state solution, we will recognize Israel immediately. And the president of Israel at that time wanted to go to Riyadh to embrace the king and say, yes, we want it. It's Ariel Sharon who put his foot down, followed by Yahoo. So you have to keep all that in mind rather than, of course, you have a right to have your own perspective, but I thought I'll bring this to your notice if you don't know it. Actually, anybody who's seriously informed knows that Hamas has been supported by by Mossad, by providing them money, and when they drove out the PLO, it was basically a counter revolution against the Palestinians. Everybody knows that. Oh.
Yeah, thank you. Tayyiba, you have raised your hand long ago.
It's okay. Thank you. My
Yeah,
question
please.
is related to the paradoxes of the present. If we see how the states that are democratic and capitalist supporting Israel, whereas only the left and the people have been supporting the Palestine issue, but we see there's hegemony, there's a media control of the capitalists, and we see how they have suppressed the issue and the solidarity of the people. So how do you see there will be a counter narrative on this issue? And secondly, only some of the Middle Eastern academics have produced and they have written about the military resilience of the Palestinian. So do you think in the contemporary it is a solution to this issue?
Sorry,
Thank
I
you,
didn't
Tayyiba.
get the question. Didn't get the question. Maybe Dr. Maya would like to respond.
I believe this similar question has come earlier also. So I would just, reassert, all of us, I think, on this fora here, agree to the fact that we need a condition conducive for people to coexist. And therefore, again, when we're talking about solutions, moving forward, I really don't think that our purpose as such here is to, argue that, it's this formula or that formula. It really has to come from, the people itself who are in the thick of things, embroiled in this conflict. I bring it back to, therefore, what are we going to do? What are we going to do as part of that larger international community? What is going to be our intervention? And I would keep saying that despite whatever we see in the mainstream, media and the way in which the social media is also being used to spread so much hatred and misinformation. Our task is precisely to keep going back to what is it that is going to make people support, basically, why should others support Palestine? We have to keep bringing the question back to that. And it's very crucial to develop that paradigm if you're going to contest or create a sustainable counter narrative and a supporting action program. And that is why, I have made, the arguments, and I've shared my observations in such a way that, the whole argument is that wherever one can provide the rationality for solidarity, that is not something fleeting, that is not something, external, but more, anchored in the whole idea of self-interest. It's in our self-interest that, conducive conditions be created for Palestine and Israel to evolve and resolve this problem. So that is why I would say that let's focus on that kind of required, discussion rather than, just saying it's this formula or this formula, because really that's not in your and my hands. That is really going to be something that, Israeli and Palestinian common people, Israeli and Palestinian people, are going to need to evolve.
how do you expect them involving
Yeah,
in isolation?
okay. I would like
Yes, please, sir.
to add my. I don't think we should belittle the fact that the United Nations Security Council has many resolutions in support of the two-state solution. There is a recent uh, press conference given by the foreign ministers of all the Arab states that they will guarantee the security of Israel if they were to give the Palestinians their own states. And I've never met a Palestinian who would not accept the two-state solution. To say that the people have to do this and do that is ideally maybe sounding very good, but there is a practical solution, and it has international law behind it. It has the governments in the region agreeing to it. It's only the extremists, especially the Netanyahu government and the more right-wing people he has in his cabinet who are opposed to it, who don't want it. Everybody is agreed that the two-state solution would be acceptable to the Palestinians, to the Arabs, and to, I think, people all over the world who want justice. Because when does a people become free? When they have their own state? So let the Palestinians have their state. It's already on the table, and all sort of support required for it from the Palestinian Arab side is available. We have to take it. We have to ensure that the Israeli state is compelled to grant the Palestinians their separate, independent, sovereign state.
Yeah, thanks. Wahid Bhatti, then Ghazala Anwar, and then Gruson.
No, I think my question has been partly asked and answered, but I would just like to, since you gave me the opportunity to add one point, I totally agree, and I think that the people have to find their own way out, and we can create international solidarity, support, and pressure to move the things right in the right direction, and that's what we are trying to do. But I think the complexity or difficulty also lies in is if one party does not has a state. Palestinians don't have a state. It's you can call them whatever you want, but they don't have a state, so they can't behave like a state. Israel is a state, the only democracy in the Middle East, as they call it, and they are not accepting any international law. All international laws against occupation, not to change the demographics and so on and so forth, they are doing it. They have pushed the situation so far that they are now saying that we don't accept two-state solution. If they accept, they don't want a viable state, because just giving Palestinians a state, which they can call a state, has absolutely of no use if Israel, if they are completely locked, air, sea, land, they have no army, they have no airport, they have no economy, they have no education system, they have no business, no import, no export. Tax collection is in the hands of Israelis. They release the fund, they can turn off the gas, they can turn off the tap of water, and so on and so forth. So you don't call it a state. And then they defy every international resolution, any respectable body, whether it's UNO, whether it's Amnesty International, whether it's International Court of Justice. I mean, recently, when arrest warrants have been issued, look at what they have been saying. The next day, Geert Wilders visits the settlements, and they have changed completely the landscape of the occupied territories, the demographics. They now say the ground facts are completely different. We have settlements now, 900,000 Jews living here. They can't go anywhere. So we can connect them via tunnels and via bridges and so on and so forth. That's not a viable state. And they went even, and USA went that far that they said that if International Court of Justice arrests any American and prosecutes any American, we have the right to invade Holland and take that person away. So if there is this kind of radicalism and irrationality from veto to everything, how do you push a two-state or one-state solution? Because two-state solution, Israel has outright rejected it. I mean, we keep on saying, I mean, Finland is having, I think, next week or next month, a global conference on two-state, and it's and Dr. Saab and Ishtiaq Saab and Maya ji are absolutely right. That is the way to go. But Israel has completely rejected it, and the whole world, Western world, has been completely paying lip service to it. They just keep on saying, and then this kind of conflict we just had last 15 months happens. And then what we will be, for next 15 months, we will be discussing this. And all the fundamental things, they are put on the back burner. So this is what I wanted to add, that this is the way to go, but we have to keep on building pressure to push the parties to go that way. Thank you.
Yeah, Ghazala, can you please
Maya,
ask
can
your
I just
question?
come in? There was just one or two things in response to what has just been shared by Wahid, and also a little while back by Professor Ahmed. You know, in many ways, Professor Ahmed, you know, one agrees to, you know, the way in which you're reading international law and, you know, the kind of important, you know, precedents that have been set. But the only reason why, you know, I have, you know, tried to focus and shift the paradigm to another set of, you know, questions is precisely because, you know, the situation is such that what happened with, you know, the Oslo Accords, or even what Wahid just shared, that the history and the way things have unfolded have been so, you know, bitter, that whatever has been also put down in the process of, you know, various moments of negotiation are so easily trampled upon. And, you know, let's not forget that, you know, the components that have gone into what we know as Hamas, you know, they supported the Oslo Accords, right? And look what has come of that. Look at the fact that, you know, Hamas, we cannot forget, is, you know, a representative, a legitimate representative, elected representative of people in Gaza, and you know that and that is why it takes it back to, you know, my response also to Lilith a little while back, that, you know, just look at the way in which, you know, Hamas is being demonized, but consider the fact that, you know, it is a representative organization, and look at the stepmotherly treatment.
Excuse me.
Larger point.
Excuse me. Now, I think this is, I don't think you have worked out the whole. If you think Hamas represents the Palestinians, then they do want to drive the Jews.
Gaza, through an election.
No, just a moment. I'm saying this won't help if you think Hamas represents Palestinian interests, because they do want to drive the Jews into the sea. Equally as Netanyahu has this position. So we have to argue that what is workable is somewhere in between, and that is the two-state solution. And that is where people should, I think, focus their attention, because that's what justice is all about. Hamas did win one elections, but they also threw PLO people from the 7th story down. They are murderers. They murdered their own Palestinian people.
No, I'm not a supporter of Hamas the way you think.
No, I know you are not. I know you are not.
I'm just saying that in the process of the election concerned, and that is coming out of the logic of the Oslo Accord. They won that election, and see, I'm just saying, an election they came to power in the same way that Modi has come to power in my country, but we don't see him as representative of Indian people. I'm not seeing the Hamas as representative of all Palestinians. I'm just saying, in the logic of the Oslo Accords, the kind of international law agreements that have been reached over time, you know, this you see this organization come to power politically in that region, in the Gaza region. Not to say that they are representative of Palestinian.
So what was the point? So what did they came to power? So did Hitler.
Yes, exactly. I'm just saying that things are more complex, and the way in which
I'm saying
sorry, both of
the
you.
two-state solution is the just one.
Yeah, sorry, sir. Sir, let me intervene. One by one, please. Huh? So, Dr. Maya, please continue. Dr. Saab later, huh? Please, I request.
So I'm just trying to draw attention to the fact that different states get formed, right? Different states get formed. In this case, through this one election, the Hamas gained political power in the Gaza Strip. And I'm saying that it's very important for us when we are engaging with the conflict to understand, of course, if these are the different state formations, and this is the way in which political power is functioning, and we see problems with it. I'm not equating Palestinian common people's interest with the Hamas. I'm just saying that given the constellation of different state systems in place, what is going to be our envisioning of a future state system, right? Which enables actually people to coexist. And I think, therefore, in that light, I was trying to make that argument. I would just also just like to reply to an earlier comment by a participant. And you also commented on this, Professor Ahmed, the whole question of the connection between apartheid and Islamophobia. And whether we see the Israeli state as an apartheid state. Personally, as an activist, I see all state systems that we're seeing as reflective of apartheid, because there is different levels or layers to which exclusion and violence that each of these state systems have unleashed. So I would just like, when we're talking about alternatives and we're talking about state formations and conjunctures in this historical process, how do we also have to be more critical of these various forms of state systems that have emerged? And
yes, please, Dr. Maya, conclude. Have you
Continue, yeah.
concluded?
Continue.
Have you
I would
concluded?
say
Or
apartheid and imperialism are really, two sides, of the same coin.
yeah, thank you. Now, Dr. Ishaq, please.
No, yeah, I
Zala,
don't.
okay, fine.
I think I've made my point.
Okay, fine.
That ideally, what state should be the one for which will be better than all the states in the past and all is a very interesting thing to consider. But I'm looking for a concrete way out of this problem, and that is there is an international consensus. The UN General Assembly has voted in favor of the Palestinians getting their own state. Where else should we go looking for it? It's nothing which is a marginal position. It's the mainstream position even of the General Assembly.
But
so when we say the Palestinians have a right to their own state, I think we should take it seriously rather than talk about what would be ideally the best state. And I do agree all states discriminate. Those things are of an academic, theoretical nature. We are talking of a concrete solution to this problem, which has persisted for such a long time. And the latest situation is that more than 45 million people have been, 45,000 Palestinians have been killed. Gaza has been reduced to a rubble. We have to ensure that this doesn't continue. And we have to be concrete with what we think is the way out. Otherwise, I don't understand what can we contribute as such.
Thank you, Dr. Ishaq. Ghazala, can you please unmute yourself and then?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm very happy that we're having a real discussion. I think what Dr. Maya is saying is that in the current geopolitical global order, the two-state solution is simply a band-aid or getting it off our table, because we already had that in Camp David. What happened? the stronger party never intends to go along with whatever gets decided. And it's not the Palestinians who say no. So we have to remember that we are doing these solutions within a context which in itself is absolutely unjust. And what
Yeah,
has
but what is the justice for that?
okay,
For
so
an unjust situation, what is justice?
let me finish. बात ये है कि the people of the world have responded with outrage. And that is extremely important. And I see that what Dr. Maya is trying to do is we have to keep, our duty is to stay informed and to express our outrage. And it makes a difference. And this outrage should continue till such things stop happening. Because they'll create another Palestine somewhere else, right? They'll go for some, now Greenland will be the next place.
Yeah.
We already have Palestine, we already have Kashmir, now it's Greenland, now it's somewhere else. So the international outrage, which is thinking outside of the state, which is thinking outside of these institutions and these tables on which some men sit down and make some decisions, it's thinking outside of it. It's saying you can do whatever. Like, it's very easy for us all to say, okay, two-state solution, and then our conscience is clear and we can go back to our lives. No, we can't, because there's also Sudan, there's also Southern Sudan. It is all part of the same game.
Thank you,
And
Vivella. Thank
yeah,
you.
I have to also add another thing, please, that as a person, my area is Quranic studies. It's so I always learn from you, and I always learn new vocabulary. But I would like you, please, Dr. Maya, to also explain what pink washing means. And I ask this question as a queer person, as a queer theologian, because you have better vocabulary for that. If you would please explain to us what pink washing means.
Yeah. Thanks, Vivella. First, I want to take a question from Grusen. Yep. Unmute yourself and then Tayyab. And then, yeah.
So I'm from Germany, actually. Yeah. So I observed the situation in Germany and the German propaganda that justifies the colonialism and the genocide in Palestine. So the German propaganda basically claims that that Hamas has been persecuting homosexuals, for example. So they use the persecution of homosexuals as a reason to commit genocide. This is how the genocide is being justified in German propaganda narrative. Yeah. So despite of this, the law, the anti-homosexuality law in Gaza has been imposed by the British. And Hamas has used a British legal system since it came to power. It didn't use the Sharia. Sharia has never been imposed by Hamas. Hamas never claimed that it wants to impose Sharia. So a British legal system is in use in Gaza. And in that British legal system, there's an anti-homosexuality law. However, Hamas has never actually enforced the law.
Okay, sir, I think we are not here to defend or whatever claim about Hamas. Do you have question? Because we have already, do you have questions? Certain questions?
So my question is actually, my question is that there should be more. What can we do to counter this narrative in terms of LGBTQ rights that actually justify the genocide in Gaza? Or the other argument is, of course, that many Western imperialists actually argue is that the Jews have the right to be there because it's a biblical homeland. But the Bible is not a legal document. It has no validity in international law at all. We don't live in the biblical era. We live today. We live in the 21st century. So basically, in terms of anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist discourse, we have to focus on this Bible-based propaganda narrative that has been going around in the Western media, that the Jews have the right to live in Israel because God gave them the land. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist, so it doesn't matter if God gave the land or not.
Okay, fine. It is not our what we think. It is all about what people think, huh? So it has already been explained very clearly by Dr. Ishtiaq. that it is a belief system. Huh? He has clearly mentioned in his talk and yesterday as well about these things. So you can, I would suggest that when the video would come out after editing, you can again. Safdar, hold on. I have to. Sorry. I have to conclude. I need to take other questions and then.
No, it's not a question, just addition.
Sir, later, please. Later.
No, because
do you have any question?
Yes, I've got it. I was just waiting, because Dr. Ishtiaq has done very, very well. Plus the
Please be
I'm,
precise
I'm,
in your question
I'm
because
just giving
we have.
just 2 seconds to praise that, and then
Sir,
no,
don't
fantastically
praise,
organized.
please.
Now
They are already praised. Sir,
my question is, please, yeah,
hold on, Tayyab.
please.
We have,
I know, you're short of time. Just my one question, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the role of Iran and Hezbollah in the future? And would it worsen the situation? Because we have got a situation very depressing and very, very shocking. What I heard today, I haven't known for lots of things I didn't know, and I'm really, really depressed. But my question is, what would it worsen which is, in my opinion, worsening the situation, and what will be future role of them? Because they are saying destruction of the earth.
Thank you, Tayyab.
Yes, very much.
Dr. Maya, Dr. Ishaq, who want to respond?
Tayyab, I would just say that, as a scholar, as an activist, I do not support, any kind of state action, the kind that we have seen in the case of Iran. And really the paradigm of, intervention that one is pushing for through a discussion like this is, how are common people, especially from the erstwhile colonized world, going to build their own strategy? How are they going to build a paradigm of politics where it is, different identities around different axes of inequalities were able to come together and build a formidable, long-lasting solidarity, especially against imperialist forces, especially against, divisive religious, groups, etc. So really, I'm saying, what is going to be the politics of people? Let's remember that the politics and interventions of states and governments will be there. What is our counterweight? What's going to be that paradigm? What's going to be that intervention? It's going to only have an effect, a long-lasting effect, have weight if it is anchored on the paradigm of what people do. Their subaltern internationalism is going to have to be anchored on the whole, not only the idea, but the actual objective reality of self-interest. It's in my self-interest and Palestinian self-interest and a queer or gay person's self-interest that we resolve the question and evolve our strategy in this paradigm of solidarity of oppressed under the common interest of fighting the forces that are imperialist, divisive, violent, etc.
Yeah, please. Because we want to close now. So before closing, I want
but I have a question.
Safdar, please.
A small thing. It's one very important.
Okay, please.
Listen. One remark and one question. Our friend Lilith said Pakistan is an ethnic state. It's not, because the Supreme Commander. Wait. Supreme. One moment, Imran. One moment, Ahmed. Supreme Commander must be Muslim. So President must be Muslim. We are sectarian state. Listen, is a correction, please. Because what we are talking here, we can misguide people.
Pakistan is not the.
It's a sectarian. It's not ethnic.
Pakistan is not the topic. So why?
No. But it was a remark. No, second thing.
Later, please.
No.
Dr. Ishaq, please. Now.
What Safdar Bhai has said is interesting, of course. Pakistan is a sectarian state. So is Iran, by the way. The Iranian constitution says this is a Shia Jafri state. So Pakistan, although not constitutionally, but practically is a Sunni state. So, I mean, maybe these distinctions are important to note, but today we were discussing the question of Palestine versus Israel and what is a just solution. I think this is what we all wanted to know. And I think we have had this different inputs into it, and I'm very happy. There was a whole range of arguments given. Very good.
I think as we discussed, and our both speakers gave a very extensive and very logically built, underpinned historical perspective. So it is very clear that it's a collusion between Zionism and imperialism, the whole thing, the way it's unfolding. And we may call, because I don't want to go into the details, I had actually slides which I deleted in which I looked at different versions of racism, feminism, imperialism, uh, dehumanization, ethnic cleansing, and so on and so forth. They very much match the statements given by the Israeli leaders, not only what the world says, but they themselves, what they said and what they are doing, the way they put their words in practice. It very much matches all the definitions you can find in the dictionaries and so on and so forth. So it is a story of destruction, dispossession, racism, apartheid, dehumanization, ethnic cleansing, genocide, and breaking international laws. I just want to, if you bear with me, tell you a very quick story, as short as I can make it, on dehumanization. I was watching interview of a guy, Israeli soldiers who left the army, went to the other side, and he was saying how systematic the dehumanization was, how very well planned, and how important it was. And he was citing a, I don't know, hypothetical or real example, and he was saying that if you are standing there and you have a 12-year-old Palestinian kid in front of you and you are pointing the gun towards him, if you think for a second that he's a human being, an innocent child, you will never do any harm to him. But if you think this is a potential terrorist, this is a beast, this is an animal, if I let him go, he's going to come back for me. So what you do, you shoot him. So these were more or less his words. So this is how this whole society is being manipulated, or the dehumanization and demonization of Palestinians has become a common thing. So Israel and allies have been exposed. I mean, whatever damage has been done, but their allies also been exposed. The West's claims for upholding democracy, rule of law, justice, human rights, giving everyone lectures, have absolutely zero credibility now. Millions of people around the world, despite all odds, came out to show solidarity with the Palestinians. I don't need to repeat, we have seen demonstrations and the governments trying to go very brutally against those demonstrations. So, and we all say that this war was provoked and this happened damage. Just, I leave you with this question to go home and think about it. What if this 15-month war hadn't happened? You think all the problems would have been solved? Gaza would be happy. Occupied territories would be free. There would be second state. You think the expansions wouldn't have continued? So I leave it up to you to. And then this deal. It does not address any fundamental issues. It's another chain in chain of events. It's just another event. It gives some breathing space to Gaza, while the oppression in other occupied territories continues, even increased. As we sit today, more than 850 Palestinians have been killed in occupied territories for no reason. The roads dug up. Israel and the West are morally exposed and isolated. It's nothing that arrest warrants have been issued against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, and a genocide lawsuit against Israel is in the ICJ. Now, we all said that Palestinians want, or Hamas or whatever, destruction of Israel, want to, yes, they do. And that's a very unrealistic thing for them to say. But what is the other side, which holds a stage, which holds a power, which is supported by the most powerful countries in the world, and the money and arms flowing in like water? They have been circulating many times these kinds of things, and you Netanyahu in front of you, I know. And if you look at their dream of greater Israel, they want to take hold of Syria. They go there and bomb whenever they want. They want to take hold of Lebanon. They want to take part of Iraq, parts of Egypt, and right up to a peace in Turkey. And this is what the whatever the kingdom of God is going to look like. And this is the Holy Land. And now, who on earth is going to think that if you think that a piece of land is holy, that you go and shed blood on it, you kill children on this holy land, you burn down the beautiful orchards, you poison the wells, you spread hatred, and you call it a holy land? You kill tens and thousands of children, destroy millions and millions of livelihoods. And so is this going to how the God's kingdom and the Holy Land going to look like, which is drenched in blood? And this map, the question is again to all of us, does this look like a peace plan to you? If other side is terrorists, this is a very good peace plan. Now, I want to end with a quote. I don't know from who this is. And he said, Israel and United States share common themes in their origin histories. Both are colonial settler apartheid states, justifying their projects through the radicalized dehumanization of indigenous people they displaced from their lands. And it's very true. It's an aspect we actually don't think about. If you look at how United States was created through settler colonialism, dehumanization of the Native Americans, the same script. We have seen hundreds of movies, cartoons, reservation camps. They did the same to Aboriginals in Australia. So they are joined by the hip by this philosophy of going in as a central colonialists and turning the whole country upside down. So with this, I would like to end our today's session officially. Again, these are different ways to get in contact with him. Thank you all so very much for everyone attending today's online dialogue, and our speakers who did a marvelous job, I think, in enlightening us. So be in touch, be safe,